This is, and we're your MCs for the day, and we're really excited to be here. Beautiful day. It's been awesome speakers so far, and we're about to have another awesome speaker.
We've introduced her more times than I can count, and yet still so excited.
All right, so our next speaker of the day, who will be starting in just a moment, is
Jaffe Jones.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. We can hear us. She's going to be talking
perfectly.
Awesome. Talking about beating inflation and more on a vegan diet. And so with inflation skyrocketing, phone is ringing off the hook from event planners and media on how to eat on a budget, vegan or not. Jaffe Jones is a nationally ranked sprinter. Not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6-time author. And they're all vegan books. They're amazing.
Some of the best books in my opinion were Eating Vegan on $4 a day. I feel like that's very useful, especially because of the inflation.
Yes, definitely. And she's also a former Emmy-winning TV investigative reporter from Miami. Her mom, aunt, and both sisters had breast cancer, and her family was part of the BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene studies. She is the only adult female in her family without it. She has placed in 260, or probably more today, yep, of course, 5K or longer races for her age group, and was the only woman in the 70 to 74-year-old, I know it's hard to believe, age group at the National Senior Games to compete in all 7 track events, and she placed in 3 of them. Ellen is a licensed cooking instructor for PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and we are always excited to hear her wisdom. Thank you for joining us today.
Just already have enough information to go vegan.
Thank you so much, Shannon and Vegan Evan. And can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yeah, we're good? All right, I'll assume we are. Thank you. So, you know, one of the advantages of doing remote stuff is I can actually show you my Emmys from Miami. And, you know, it's just been this wild ride of doing the books, and then COVID ended a lot of I was sometimes on the road twice a weekend giving talks like this, but virtually we can really reach you. And before I get into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of how do you eat vegan on $4 a day? Yes, you can, even now with inflation. I did just want to mention another reason I'm not there is this morning, I got the veteran grandmasters. They gave these nice little glass goblets at Minnesota Key. There was a 5K race there by Bayfit. And then yesterday at the, you gotta love this, this is a veteran grandmasters at the Furry Scurry 5K. And so it's the biggest bring your dog to a race event in all of Southwest Florida that I've ever been to. We brought our Black Lab, and you know, it was a lot of fun, you know, but, you know, so many people, like, I just want to say when they're bringing their dogs, and when I posted yesterday, I said this, you know, hashtag, why love one, eat another. So I think it's important for me as a representative of being a vegan runner to say that this is just so important that we understand all sentient beings have feelings and sensations, and we need to respect that. So behind me, with this morning's edition, 270 5K or longer races for my age group, just on plants, because somebody came up to me at a race once and said, you can't race on a vegan diet. And I set out to set the record straight. So enough about me, because I know you all are just figuring out how do we eat vegan on a budget. And this has been my passion. I was a TV, not only investigative, but consumer reporter as well. So I followed the consumer price index going all the way back to the 1970s. So I know how much the price of beans and grain, specifically brown rice, has increased over 40 years. And the answer is not a whole lot. And since I actually started really crunching the numbers, because I knew I was going to write my book, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, I actually started putting the numbers down. This was before computers were really mainstream and phones, cell phones. I wrote them on an Excel sheet. So the price of beans back in the 1990s, early 2000s was only a nickel an ounce. And guess what? In all this time, what are we talking? 20 years, the price of beans has not gone up a single penny. If anything, it has dropped a fraction of a penny. And if you go to Walmart and people are going like, oh, really? Are you recommending Walmart? And I'm going, if you live below the poverty level of $23,000 a year for a family of 4, you are already shopping at Walmart. And I figured every community has a Walmart, and that would be a good baseline so that I wouldn't get the excuse, as I always have and still do, oh, being vegan is so elitist. You've got to go to expensive health food stores. No, you don't. So nobody can give me the excuse that they don't have a Walmart in their community if they really want to stick to this. I get that there are food deserts and maybe some exceptions have to be made, but even if you get food delivered, it still is incredibly cheap when you are buying beans in bulk. And that is the way to do it. So people go, oh, you mean I got to cook from scratch? And I don't have time for that. And I go, you don't have time for diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. I spent my childhood, starting at the age of 5, when my aunt died of breast cancer in our home, watching so many relatives get preventable diseases and die long, slow, painful deaths. It's just not, over decades, it's just not sustainable. No matter who pays for that heart bypass surgery. And that's another thing to include in the price of being sick and the cost of food is how much does that bypass surgery really cost? My ex-husband was not vegan, and he was the main reason I wrote my second book, which is called Kitchen Divided: Vegan Dishes for Semi-Vegan Households. And, I would often ask my audiences when I would travel around the country, how many of you live in mixed marriages where one of you is vegan and the other one is not? And, I would get a lot of eye rolling. So that was really another inspiration for me to write that book. And when he had his death-defying heart attack, we spent an entire month in cardiac rehab, where he was connected to all the bells, whistles, wires, and devices. And, the medication was administered multiple times a day. And we asked at the end of that time, how much would this have cost if Medicare had not paid for it? Because I was really curious. And the nurses told us $1 million for 30 days in cardiac rehab. That is not sustainable, no matter who pays for it. You, me, the government, a corporation. It just isn't sustainable. So I always joke sometimes about how much does that hamburger really cost? If we divide 30 days into $1 million, that hamburger is really costing like $1,000 or $100,000. So we can, maybe that is, you might think that's kind of an extreme, but it really does factor into the price of food. But getting back to beans. So if you buy the largest bag that Walmart has, and I am compulsively checking the prices at Walmart just to make sure that if somebody says to me, oh, you can't do this, that absolutely you can. So the last time I checked at Walmart, within the last month, the price of beans, these are the pinto beans. Usually it's the 20-pound bag. That's the largest bag they have. And it used to be that bag was cheaper than some of these smaller bags, but it depends on your Walmart. It just depends that sometimes these smaller bags can still be a nickel an ounce for a 2-ounce portion, or I'm sorry, a nickel an ounce for a dry beans. And so it takes 2 ounces to make a cooked serving that will cook up into 4 ounces. Because you know how when you cook dry beans, they go poof, you add water to them. So by the time you do that and cook them for, I don't know, an hour or 2, or in your Instapot, maybe just 20 minutes, it's going to be a full 4-ounce serving of beans. That costs you 20 cents. So I'm sorry, and that costs you a dime. I was thinking about rice. Rice is about a dime an ounce. And so again, 4 ounces of that cooked up, because rice also does the same poof thing when you add water, it's about 20 cents for a 4-ounce serving of rice. So that's a dime for a serving of beans and 20 cents for a serving of rice. That's really crazy cheap. And then I always say, if you give up dairy, if you give up animal products altogether, you have plenty of money left over to buy your produce. And so people are saying, well, produce is just so expensive. Well, it can be, but there are ways. And I have a section in my book, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, of how you can get cheap produce. So let's talk about that. One is check out the website, localharvest.org. On that site, you can go in, type in your zip code, your city, or there's an interactive map, point the arrow on Florida or wherever you are, and it will give you a complete list of CSAs, we'll talk about that in a minute, or co-ops. So often at these co-ops, and a lot of these places are sources for your local farmers market. And when you go to these co-ops, often they will have like produce that's getting ready to be thrown out. So sometimes you can get it for free that way or greatly discounted, or you can volunteer there and get a work share and the produce is discounted that way. Same thing applies for a CSA. And if I were there in person, I'd ask you to maybe raise your hand and tell me, and you still can because I can kind of see you guys, if anybody belongs to a CSA. So a CSA is a community-supported agriculture farm. And when you go on this website, localharvest.org, you will see, again, the CSAs and where they are located throughout Florida, throughout the country. So you can go anywhere and get this produce for discounted rates. And a CSA, you generally pay a membership fee, and they will tell you to come to a certain place. And here in Sarasota, where I'm at, we have like 20 drop-off points, including one down the street in Lakewood Ranch at the candy store of all places. I kid you not, a candy and ice cream store, but they also sell like nuts. I guess that's, I don't know. So you can go there and they will give you a big box full of organic produce. It's going to be kale, spinach, lettuces, radishes, tubers, all kinds of things that grow here in Florida. And we are so lucky this time of year because, I mean, go to any local farmer's market and you will see that all this produce is abundant. And the CSA that I have gotten it from in the past has been Warden's Farm. And I know they're at the Sarasota Farmers Market, they're at the Lakewood Ranch Farmers Market, and many farmers markets throughout Southwest Florida. So the CSA allows you to be kind of guaranteed every week you're going to get this abundant box full of produce. And when I calculated it out for what I was getting, it was about $28 a box for the week. And I'd be lucky to consume all those veggies in 1 week. You can get different sizes, but that just gives you an idea of one way you can get produce really cheap. And they do offer work shares, and they do sometimes make available produce that is not, just picked out of the garden this morning. It was picked out maybe yesterday or the day before. Geraldson's up in the Bradenton area is another one. And again, just research on localharvest.org where you can get a local farm or a CSA near you. Incredibly, incredibly cheap. So those are, my main tips for going cheap on a budget. Of course, fitness is part of that too. If you don't need to be seeing a doctor, or if you don't need the medicines that maybe your insurance doesn't cover, these are all different ways that you can save money. I also try and make a smoothie every day or every other day in my big blender. And I've had, as many of us have, even though we're vegan and we think that's our insurance policy, because I was on book tour constantly, and eating Cliff Bars like all the time with my publisher at his table and not going away from the table to eat my 7 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, I ended up being diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. And that can be genetic. And my father had that. And it can get really bad where your joints are just all gnarled. And you're probably going, well, wait, vegans aren't supposed to get arthritis. Generally, we don't, which is why I'm 70 years old. and have been running as a vegan for the past 42 years, and my knees are fine. I do not have any arthritis currently, but I did get this early preliminary diagnosis, and I met up with Dr. Brooke Goldner, who is amazing. She wrote the book, Goodbye Lupus, and then after working with me, she asked me to write the foreword to her third book called Goodbye Autoimmune Disease. And the reason was, after just a few weeks of her program, which was a ginormous Vitamix, or high-powered blender full of greens, and this is what I carry around now, and then just doing that exclusively for a few weeks, all symptoms of psoriatic arthritis went away. And she used the before and after pictures that I sent her in her book and on her website. My fingernails were all white and ready to come off. I still have some residual scarring there, but what was happening with my fingernails actually coming off and turning white all the way back to the cuticle, that stopped. The fatigue I was having went away. This is all autoimmune disease. And, I will say that as a reporter, we did not get paid hazard duty, nor did we even know about many of the things that we went into, burning buildings, covering disasters. And, I consider it pretty much a miracle that I don't have any kind of cancer at this point, especially given my family history. We were part of, as Shannon mentioned, the BRCA1 and the BRCA2 gene studies, which now you can go to your doctor and get tested for that. So I think, having a healthful diet, and by the way, half the cases of breast cancer in my family, they believe were environmentally triggered, because the two genetic cases they believe that happened in the 20s and 30s in my relatives, those typically are the genetic kinds of cancers. And of course, when you are participating in these studies, they don't tell you the results. Although I did get tested for the Alzheimer's gene recently, and I don't have that. So yay to that, though running in particular is very preventative, as is a whole foods, plant-based diet, very helpful toward preventing all of these diseases of affluence, as T. Colin Campbell has pointed out in his book and his work, The China Study. So lots of resources for you to check out. I am just really the beneficiary of what some of these hero vegan doctors like Neil Barnard, John McDougall, nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Michael Greger. Women my age just really didn't go to medical school. So you don't find a lot of doctors that are my age, and especially vegan doctors, because, this was kind of considered heretical back in the days when I first started listening to this, and my radar was up. I heard Dr. Neil Barnard. He was really the first vegan doctor I heard back in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s. And I started to hear this a little bit from my obstetrician, who knew about our family history of breast cancer. And he was going like, well, maybe you might want to look into that vegetarian diet. They didn't know the difference between vegetarian and vegan. And now we do. We have so much more information. So this is all about the money you save at the store and at the doctor. So some other cheap vegetables that I'd like to recommend, again, I have scoured the shelves, and, cabbages are insanely cheap. Kale, especially, you can grow it in an earth box. I have a couple of earth boxes right outside my kitchen door. And so I have, lots of herbs growing, especially this time of year. The cherry tomatoes, they reseed themselves. They grow really well in earth boxes or in your garden if you don't have a little friend here who likes to dig them up. I don't know if you can see Princess. Oops, I don't want to unplug the phone. I think I just did something here. Okay, let's bring it back. All right, there, we're good. So anyway, Princess does love to dig things up, so you just have to find a spot where it works for you. So the earth boxes for cherry tomatoes and the dark green leafy vegetables. Lettuces grow very well this time of year. These are all things you can plant yourself, or just kind of keep an eye out for them at the grocery store. Sweet potatoes and regular red, white potatoes grow pretty well in our sandy soil. And again, that's the challenge here is that, and I found this with our CSA, and I would go volunteer just to know where the seeds were coming from, to make sure that they were not genetically altered seeds, those kinds of things. And the CSAs, they may not pay for the organic certification, although Warden's Farm does. But if you spend time volunteering there, which will also give you a discount on your food, or maybe even free, you can see where they are getting the seeds from. And so I knew that, everything was on the up and up as far as that went, even though that particular farm I went to, not Warden's, a different one, did not have the organic certification, which can be expensive and a bit of a process to go through. So you just have to do your own due diligence to see what works for you. Other things that are insanely cheap, onions, green beans will grow here. And I'm not suggesting everybody go out and plant your own garden, but if you can, that's really awesome, because like, what else are you going to do with your time, your free time? And it's fun to get your hands in the dirt, but definitely these will be the cheapest vegetables at the store. And of course, buying in season, that's a big thing. Strawberries now are very much in season here in Florida. I do like to buy my berries organic because of just, again, the family history of cancer. And berries are very systemic when it comes to them absorbing the pesticides and herbicides. I think there was a study once that showed there was like more than 70 toxins that were measured in in a strawberry. So it's a very porous skin. So everything is really sifting through that the surface of the berries. So good if you can do that. But if you can't, Dr. Goldner says, if you are fighting autoimmune disease, which many of us are on different levels, eating conventional is still better than eating animal products. So that's just, one of the messages I wanted to share with you. In terms of how to budget things, cooking, batch cooking is very important. So maybe pick a couple of times a week where you're cooking up those big batches of beans and rice and put them in the fridge. Always have some salsa on hand, which you can make yourself with the tomatoes you're growing in your garden, and a little basil. Oh, basil grows like a weed here if you're not already growing that. And I always sneak that into the pasta I make for us as a family here. And, there are ways you really can incorporate the greens into the lower cost foods like whole grains. Millet is another cheap whole grain that I love, and it's yellow. So if you miss butter, some people are used to putting butter on all of their whole grains. Millet is very yellow, and it kind of is sometimes about deceiving the mind's eye that there is butter on that whole grain, when in fact it's just the color of the grain. So there are lots of different herbs. I always ask my cooking class audiences, so when was the last time you all refreshed your herbs that come in a jar? And so often, people say, 4, 5, 6 years ago, and that's okay. Although I will encourage you, if you have had your herbs around for a long time, twist open the top. Don't just look in the holes of the plastic top that is on the herb bottle. Take that thing off, because one time I did that. I was getting ready to do a live cooking demo, and I did that. I was going to put the measuring spoon inside, and I'm seeing these white spider web type things that were growing in there. So, it had really expired. It was well beyond its time. So I love fresh herbs. Again, that's a cheap way to have very fresh tasting vegetables and potatoes. I love putting chives. There are 2 different kinds of chives that grow here in Florida. You can go to a garden store and pick out the plants that are already established, or you can try growing them from seed. And Seeds of Change is a place that I have ordered my non-GMO seeds from the past, and also was where the farm that I participated in, where they got their seeds. But these things, they're always changing, so just check. I think I heard that Seeds of Change got bought out by a big food company. So you always have to stay on top of this. Google is your friend. Just keep searching and searching, and don't ever give up. Were we just about to look at somebody's I don't know. Yeah, whatever. And if you have any questions, I can hear you, and please feel free to do that if you have if you have any questions, or one of the moderators maybe can pick up on that. I'm just real passionate about being able to eat vegan on a budget. There are just so many different ways to do it. The smoothies, even though I was telling you I used to eat a full blender full of smoothie at a time, I now spread it over 2 days so that I can keep my costs low. And because my issues have pretty much resolved, and obviously I'm doing all this insane running and just really trying to put it out there. Somebody came up to me at a race in 2011 when Eat Vegan on $4 a day came out. I was wearing a shirt, unlike what I'm wearing now, but I was wearing my Eat Vegan on $4 a day shirt, and just kind of being out there with it. And somebody came up and said, "You can't run a race on a vegan diet." And I'm going like, wait, what? I've been doing this since 2006, hadn't really been keeping meticulous track of it like I am now. And part of this is just to show that we do get enough protein, we get enough energy, even at this age. And, at races, it is not uncommon for the race director, as they are handing out this award, to go and look at my face, look at whatever. And they're going like, "Can we see your driver's license?" That has actually happened to me 3 times as I'm getting an award. Or, they'll make other comments about, "Are you sure you're in the right age group?" Or, "Weren't you supposed to be here 2 age groups ago?" That kind of thing. So a vegan diet, a whole foods, and I say vegan, not plant-based, because if you Google the words plant-based, you will see all kinds of variations on a theme, interpretations. Oh, plant-based. Well, we mean to be based in plants before 6, but at 6 o'clock, then we can start eating meat and dairy. No, that is not what plant-based means to me. It may mean that to others. I say the word vegan, nothing with a mother, nothing with a face, because I am passionate about, we have to be, as a former Emmy-winning journalist here, that we have to be very clear with our words. There is no wiggle room. We don't have time to play semantics with the V word, as I like to say. Our future generations are depending on it. The world seems to be getting crazier by the moment. And this is the one thing you can control with your wallet and your pocketbook. So some other tips that I have for eating vegan on a budget: if you have a certain amount of cash or money that you have devoted to your budget of spending on food, put it in an envelope, put it in a drawer. And when you have reached the end of that envelope and the cash that's in it, then you better get yourself invited to somebody else's house at the end of the week. But seriously, I used to work in television as a consumer reporter with consumer credit counseling. And that's exactly what they would tell you to do after you cut up your credit cards. Now, I know with these smartphones, it is just so easy to click with a button, Apple Pay, and there you are, $3,000 in debt for the end of the month. So it is really important to get this under control if you are trying to stick with a plan. And other things that you can do, if you're going out to eat somewhere and you think that you're not going to get a vegan meal, just take a bowl and just a quick spoonful of beans and rice and salsa, and then you're out there. Make soup. That is another really cheap way to eat inexpensively, and batch cook it again. Make a huge pot of it and freeze half of it, and then the other goes in the fridge, whatever you don't eat that night. And then you can add your favorite whole grain to it to thicken it up, add water, dilute it. I mean, this can be just an amazing way to eat. And do it so efficiently on a budget. When you are shopping at the store, look high, look low, because the manufacturers pay a lot of money for that impulse food to reach you at eye level when you are going down the grocery store aisle. So the cheaper brands, in fact, those big bags of beans, say that 10 times, that I was telling you about earlier at Walmart, they are on the bottom shelf usually, as well as the big bags of rice. Part of it is they're so heavy, so maybe that's another reason that they're putting them on the bottom shelf, although I can lift them, and you should be able to as well. Other tips are just, don't be afraid to shop for a deal, keep track of your expenses and, what you need on your phone, and don't impulse buy, just stick to that shopping list. And I have menu plans in my book, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, just to prove that you not only can do it on $4 a day, but I have a couple days in there where you can see you can do it on $3 a day. So this is a piece of carrot cake. You can find me at vegcoach.com. You can find my books. They're all on Amazon. The other books are, as I mentioned, Kitchen Divided, then Paleo Vegan, got so annoyed with the paleo craze. And National Geographic agreed with me on a cover story called The Real Paleo Diet and said we were all vegans anyway back then. The men couldn't, their success rate was terrible in catching animals. So it was the women back home tending the nest who were just foraging for berries, nuts, and seeds. So then Vegan Fitness for Mortals, as I got into fitness, then Vegan Sex that I co-wrote with Dr. Joel Kahn, because what's good for the heart is good for other parts. It's all about blood flow, and erectile dysfunction is often the leading indicator of heart disease by as much as 30 years. So it's important to get to your doctor if you are having any issues with that. And then I finally joke that if Vegan Sex doesn't work out, then Vegan for One, single serving recipes. That book also is a very good guide for how to eat inexpensively, because we waste so much food. Well, at least with Eat Vegan on $4 a day, with those recipes, you can definitely batch cook and do all of that. But Vegan for One will also give you single serving recipes, so we're not wasting food. All right, I am seeing Shannon and Mike sticking their heads in the camera, so I'm thinking that is my time to say goodbye. If you have any questions, reach out to me on vegcoach.com. I am so happy to help you in any way I can. Thank you, Mike and Denise, for allowing me to be here. And Vegan Evan, of course. Oh my gosh, you guys are so amazing. Just I wish I could
Have the question.
all right, thank you guys.
Ellen, can you hear me?
Are there,
I know
yes.
at least one question.
Yes.
It was about, do you primarily eat raw? I know I walked away for a minute, so you may have talked about this a bit, but
No, I didn't actually. The question is, do I primarily eat raw? When I was dealing with psoriatic arthritis, absolutely. But and I try and eat a ginormous salad at least once a day, and I'll make it maybe for lunch and have some of the leftovers for dinner. But no, I am, I do eat the grains. So my favorite grains are brown rice, millet, quinoa, very high in protein. That's the highest ranked grain for protein, and beans. I don't eat a whole lot of beans just because, without going into like another half-hour story, I have erect colon from chronic constipation as a child. And my parents just didn't know any better. And so it's thought I have an extra foot of colon just from that. So beans kind of just don't sit with me, and other people, I mean, I eat them occasionally. And by the way, I have a whole chapter on beans and Eat Vegan. So I eat mainly lentils because the smaller beans tend not to be as disruptive as some of the other beans. It takes about 3 to 6 weeks while you're transitioning if you are eating beans. And just different things work for different people. But I eat a ton of greens. I do eat them raw in the smoothies that I make and cook them sometimes at the end of the day. So I would say probably about 50-50. Any other questions?
yeah, there was another one. It was about, so I'm assuming probably mostly low or no oil, low or no salt for the most part, especially when you're cooking. But would that be accurate?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we go out to restaurants a lot, and it is just so annoying how I don't know what the deal is with chefs, and they think that vegans don't have taste buds and they just drown stuff in oil. So we make a point of saying no oil, no salt. I have a blood pressure problem. I don't have a blood pressure problem, but I found it was kind of like when I was telling people I'm vegan, I would say I have a dairy allergy. I don't have a dairy allergy. Well, most of us are lactose intolerant, even if we don't test positive. But that's just one way to get the chef to take attention. It's like, don't mess with that. So the answer to that question is, especially going out, really try and stick to that. And of course, at home, I have tons and tons of spices, both the fresh, as I mentioned, and You know, Mrs. Dash has just all kinds. I love Italian spices when they combine it all together. But as I mentioned, don't be afraid to replace those babies every year because they'll taste better too. I get volumes of chipped garlic, and I try, you know, when I have time, I'll put the fresh garlic and turmeric into whatever it is I'm making because it's such a good, both of those are such good anti-inflammatories.
Okay, so part two of the question was going to be, so how do you make things taste good without the oil and the salt? You did answer a lot of that. The person in particular was asking, especially if they don't use garlic or onions, do you have any great recommendations for getting some good flavor?
Yeah, I would experiment with Mrs. Dash's stuff. I mean, she makes, or they make just a lot of combinations. There's even one called Everything But the Bagel. And I think Mrs. Dash makes a variety of that has no salt in it. So just experiment. Sesame seeds, I find, are a great way to add texture. And sometimes it's about the mouthfeel. Garlic chips, well, you said you can't have garlic, but I do. I buy like big, ginormous bags of garlic chips and just kind of pour them over whatever vegetable I'm making. But you can do that with any spice. And so if you can't do the allium family, that would be garlic and onions. You know, tomatoes, if you can tolerate those, that's a nice contrast. You know, sometimes we just want, like, think about okra and tomatoes. That's a very popular Southern dish. So whatever other vegetables that you can have, potatoes may add the texture and the mouthfeel that would be helpful. But just, you know, go stand in front of the spice section and see what you can have. You know, turmeric, they use in Indian foods like it's salt and just kind of pour it all over everything. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much, Ellen. We will see you soon, I'm sure. Great to have you here, though, virtually, and thanks for being live with us. And have a great rest of your day. Big round of applause for Ellen Jaffe Jones.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right, so your final speakers